I'll start introducing and say it's great to see everyone here. For those who don't know me, I'm Diana Barrero Zalles. I am the head of research and sustainability at the Global Blockchain Business Council. It's really a pleasure to welcome every one of you to our first of a series of GSMI roundtables. Today, we're going to focus on sustainability. We're going to give it about 15 minutes or so for a brief overview of our sustainability paper, which is the result of many months of collaboration with our focused working group under the co-chairs of Blake Goud, CEO of RFI Foundation, and David Fortson, CEO of LOA Labs and member of the board of directors of the Blockchain times Climate Leadership Network, BXC. And then after our presentation, we're going to open it up for a discussion with the members of this roundtable to really touch upon what do we need to do, what insights are actionable, and what participants and supporters can we bring into our collaborations to make things happen to advance blockchain technology for sustainability initiatives. We're really, really grateful to the co-chairs and participants and all of the supporters who have been with us through all of the journey of GSMI. It's a journey that's meant to be continued for taking action, for leveraging blockchain technology, in this case, for sustainability. So I'll open it up. Let's start the paper debrief. I think maybe we can put in the chat the link to the paper. I have it here, so I'm going to put it for everyone to have access to it, unless you've seen it already. Our GSMI sustainability paper, which we will discuss now. So mostly welcome, David and Blake. And maybe we can get down into the most important part of the paper, which is climate finance today. Why is it important? How did we get to where we are? And what are the issues with climate finance?
Go ahead, Blake.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the need is really clear now that we've seen the start of COP and earlier this year, the IPCC reports and the list of different planetary boundaries beyond climate that are currently either in breach or nearing a breach. All of these things keep the Earth habitable, and the direction that we're headed is unsustainable. And so the idea for climate finance is, how can we mobilize the resources that are needed to push us back into a sustainable path, or a regenerative to repair some of the damage that's been caused? And it's private finance, public finance. But one thing that's a challenge when you're talking about climate finance is that there's not a single agreed upon definition, and so a lot of things can get labeled into climate finance, and so that presented a little bit of a difficulty in getting started on the working group. And so we kind of broke it down into a few types of areas to focus on, of looking at natural capital, which I'm sure David can elaborate on, looking at the role of supply chains and connecting the value across from primary production all the way to final consumers and then onto waste. And then some of the economic models that interact with supply chains that create a disparity between the futures for the global north and global south.
And I can pick up a little bit on that. I think this also kind of keys into another conversation around regenerative finance. I think climate finance, regenerative finance are adjacent, if not deeply related to each other. At some point in the very near future, let's be real, it's not going to be climate finance, regenerative finance is going to be finance. The future of finance integrates deeply ecological health of the planet and its people. And so I think when, as we're digging into the sustainability working group paper that we did here, why we chose supply finance or supply chains, excuse me, as a incredible use case for really deeply examining the financial problems or financial modeling problems, as well as just kind of the extractive nature of what we kind of popularly refer to as finance. I think between climate finance, regenerative finance, we're actually more deeply bringing what has been externalized for many, many years in our financial systems, which is really the health of people and planet, and bringing those deeply into the equation so that they are at the front side of our decision-making, modeling, and how we set up relationships between economics and ecological health for in the future, now and in the future, being modeled for deep alignment so that they are one and the same.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One thing also, Blake, that you mentioned is the importance of supply chains as connectors between the global north and global south, where many economic dynamics happen, as a lot of our raw materials today are being sourced from the global south, and a lot of the consumption trends go toward the global north. And the nature of those economic relationships being more extractive today, and the role that supply chains play. What do you think is the role of supply chains in actually advancing sustainable solutions on the other hand?
Well, I think one of the reasons we focused on supply chains was because there has been a lot of efforts through legislation, particularly coming out of Europe, to push sustainability policy out beyond the regional boundaries of Europe through the path of supply chains, because they do act as that connector between global north and global south. And so whether it's through the deforestation directive, supply chain due diligence directive, within the finance sector, there's the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which applies to European and non-European companies, or the carbon taxes through the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. All of these things are really pushing policies through value chains and around sustainability, and starting with that kind of tracking part, but just pushing out kind of the obligation for other people to improve sustainability without having financial flows that go along with that isn't going to present the or create the outcomes that we need. It's just going to potentially create more tensions between global north and global south if the kind of rules and requirements are being lifted without providing resources, and if most of the value of sustainability is getting captured within developed markets at the kind of consumer side of companies being able to sell products for higher prices, finance going to companies in the global north that provide value for their own sustainability practices, but don't transmit that value down the supply chains to companies, producers, and consumers in the global south. Then it kind of reinforces some of the inequitable nature of the value creation process currently. And so that's where one of the things we wanted to look at in this is how can you change that. And some of the reasons the blockchain fits in with that is just because of the complexities of those value chains and transmittal of information between stakeholders to them.
I'm going to share my screen briefly and turn it over to Dave. As we mentioned, economic systems. We've mentioned, and we've put this together with the help of Riley through graphics, a lot of our economic systems have historically been very extractive, where there's consumption and use and a lot of waste. And Dave, I know you have a lot to say on more regenerative systems, where we reimagined the nature of economic relationships in a way that is much more impact friendly, and reuse, recycle, conservation is a core element of this. So can you talk through how something like this is at the core of the regenerative economy?
Yeah, so I think, I think visualizations like this are helpful. You can imagine the current, as supply chains being a focus for this work, in some ways are incredibly effective at showing the extractive nature of our current economic models, where both energy, natural capital resources, and value extraction really it's not exactly a one-way street, but it goes really significantly from south to north right now. Yet we leave in its wake in the south deeply ecological impacts, economic imbalances, civil society disruptions, as the kind of, frankly, the incredibly efficient nature of these capital markets works to continue that extraction unabated for many, many years, which is actually creating a really important thing to understand, which is this negative feedback loop, or really deleterious feedback loop between global north and global south when it comes to supply chains and how they impact economics and resource extraction. So as we think about diving back into what could be possible in a new model here, in thinking about regenerative economics that place that bring both or keeps the finance, or not keeps all of it, but obviously keeps significant amounts of the value that is otherwise being extracted from the south to north and keeps it in the south, creates more transparent ways and inexpensive, lower overhead ways of distributing that wealth through these new technologies, like we're talking about with blockchain, that creates measurement of the ecological health at any given time, and creates immediate feedback loops in order to rebuild or repair ecology in the global south and be able to internalize those costs to the consumers in the global north, and create more dynamic and positive resource loops between the global north and global south that recognize that ecological and human health cannot be just maintained or enjoyed by one half of that equation. They need to be equitably distributed and enjoyed by both sides of the producers, suppliers, and buyer side of this relationship. So in regenerative economics, as you're seeing here, it is more circular. Consumption is not externalized for taxpayers or for philanthropists, or frankly for less powerful or less or communities that have been disenfranchised, who often take the impact of that waste. It internalizes all of it, brings it into a more virtuous loop that really, from cradle to grave of a product, recognizes that every interaction between the human environment and the ecological environment need to be accounted for and immediately addressed at the transaction level. And so that's, I think, what we're trying to get here, as like, we've got to create a new model moving forward that recognizes this new way of integrating ecological and human health into these supply chain transactions, which have traditionally been extractive, favorable really toward the northern counterparts. And again, I'd say even only favorable in a very short-term window, right? We're enjoying kind of the fruits of this in a lot of ways, but it's almost like a false idol, because the deep impact on the planet and humans in the global south is going to require reallocation of resources in much less just and efficient ways to address climate change and disruption of these supply chains if we aren't more accurate, immediate, and place-based in creating more virtuous economic loops. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, and I wanted to point out a lot of work being done toward carbon markets as an example, as a way to do that, to reallocate resources and economic benefits toward conservation and basically regeneration. And we've talked about in the paper, we cover a number of use cases, and we really cover like why technology, specifically blockchain technology, is important to advance solutions towards sustainability. So I'll open it up to both of you on your thoughts on use cases, solutions, and why transparency. What are the features of blockchain technology that can help us get to a more virtuous feedback loop, like you mentioned, Dave? Because today we are in a current economic system where why do we pay for something when as soon as a tree is cut down, that's where economic benefits happen. People pay, people value, and we go back to this, right? The extraction, the consumption and use and waste, as opposed to allocating money to and incentives to conservation. So how do we connect the dots with blockchain technology?
I can start, and maybe I'll kick over to Blake after that. Just with blockchain technology, I think as many of you will likely already appreciate and understand, being able to offer a level of radical transparency around transactions and data is an important part of building trust in financial markets. The ability to distribute funds seamlessly across borders, accurately to defined wallets based on certain requirements being met, creates new opportunities for wealth distribution without having a kind of opaque or gated middle agents that may extract or have takes that are unseeable or unavailable to the parties that they're meant for, and be able to more accurately track and incentivize certain ecological behaviors, and being able to incorporate those into smart contracts or other type of mechanisms that in a lot of ways, again, continue to remove gatekeeping by players in any part of the equation that are either extracting at that level or creating arbitrary barriers to making sure that we're rewarding the behaviors, rewarding the right people at the right time, at the right place, in this case, in a supply chain, for these virtuous behaviors that we're trying to incentivize that have incredible impacts on the ground, where they are, not just at the finished product, not just at the buyer level, but at the core ground level producer level as a possibility. So I'll stop there, and Blake, I know has more to speak on this.
Yeah, and I think another part of it is that if you think about the current economic systems, their money is paid for extracted resources. Often that money doesn't end up in the place where the resources are extracted. It gets sent back through financial center. It gets kind of re-lent back to the places where the value is created that generated those resources. And that happens in part because of weak institutions in those countries, weak domestic financial markets, weak domestic financial systems, lots of financial exclusion. And that's a cycle that kind of feeds upon itself. And so the way that, it's not that there's not trust within, among the people within society, it's that the institutions are not trusted. And so if you can kind of provide that the radical transparency can help kind of substitute in and help better domestic resource mobilization to keep more of the resources in for the benefit of countries that are at the kind of root of the extractive economic system, rather than having it be cycled back through developed market financial center where there's interest added, where there's limited flows back because of credit ratings that are only going to get further impacted as climate change progresses. And so that's one area where blockchain, because it has the immutable, trustless system, can help keep more of those resources within global south countries that are going to be needed for mitigating climate change, adapting to the impact of it, and addressing all of the other things that we discussed.
And briefly, our discussion, I'm going to do one more screen share and mention you've mentioned sustainability linked supply chain finance, and if you want to talk through briefly the role of blockchain in financing more sustainable supply chains, that this could be relevant across industries.
Yeah, so people do pay more for sustainable products, and so often that benefit gets captured at the final producer level. And final producers, kind of the end buyers, are using supply chain finance to provide incentives to help keep their supply chains healthy. When that's being overlaid with sustainability angle, one of the challenges is that often they can only see kind of what their direct suppliers' practices are for sustainability linked financing. And the way that blockchain can help in that is providing ways to track that sustainability practice all the way through supply chains to improve the ability for data to move one direction and financing to move the other direction, to address the issue that expectations of sustainability increasing across supply chain, but they're not financial resources flowing the other direction to help make that happen.
Right. And so at this point, unless you want to add anything else briefly, we can open it up for a discussion with the participants in this roundtable. So I'm going to say thank you so much, Blake and David, for sharing these main insights from the paper. Your valuable contributions as co-chairs are very much appreciated. And also a thank you to all the working group members, supporters, and feedback providers for all of their insights. We are now going to end the recording and start an open discussion with the participants of this roundtable on really next steps from this paper.